Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of the Edge podcast for CHROs. This is the sixth episode with Shaakun with us. I have my co-host Nisha with me joining this afternoon. So to give you a quick overview of what our last podcast was before I introduce my guest for tonight as well. So we spoke to Akshay from Space Matrix, who's the CEO of Space Matrix, and in fact we had a very interesting conversation with him. It is very different from what we've covered so far in the journey. We covered around what physical office spaces could look like in the future and so we've addressed some of the reopening challenges that corporates and startups are facing, given that there are a lot of if you've been noticing the last couple of days in the news over there that's been happening, a lot of unicorns have been coming up in India, and all of them have started taking up grade A office spaces and central business districts and all these spaces, and even existing corporates in India, right? All the large scale enterprises, they're also reimagining the way that collaboration needs to take place, because now earlier workspaces were designed for individual work, but now they're designed for collaborative work. And I think so what we've done is that we've actually approached in a very framework sort of fashion, wherein we've actually broken down the different aspects of what it basically what happens is a lot of people, when you think of office space, you think about uh, policies, you think about the color coding, you think about a bunch of these aspects. What we've done is that we've extracted the business aspects of it, and we've turned that into some tangible outcomes that you can really start thinking about from day one, right? Like, so that's what we've made an attempt to do. To give you an introduction of our guest here, Shaakun Khanna is a highly sought after business and HR transformation expert in Asia, and serves as the head of human capital management application strategy Asia Pacific at Oracle Corporation. He's also the co-founder of Consensus Advisory and a master coach with the International Center for Contemporary Consciousness. Over the last 23 years, Shaakun has been a transformation advisor to many Fortune 500 and industry-leading companies. During this period, Shaakun has been the CEO of Right Management, head of IBM Smarter Workforce, and the leader of employee engagement and leadership development practice for Gallup Consulting. Shakun has helped many organizations transform their business strategy, digital footprint, employee branding, talent management, organizational design and development, employee experience, and all of the and including succession planning as well. So Shakun works with large and medium businesses to help them evolve to the next level of growth and succession. The unique combination of expertise in business strategy, leadership, development, change management, and even his sheer passion for HR technology and business management make him a complete advisor for CHROs and boards. So Shakun brings a lot of rich experience of managing business for global organizations in various leadership roles. He's an accredited executive coach as well. Shakun is also a master facilitator of the consciousness brand based leadership, which is with the International Center for Contemporary Consciousness. So at his core, right? Shakun is an inquisitive traveler and an avid reader. So Shakun is greatly inspired by Dr. Stephen Covey as well and Donald Clifton, which instills in him a great passion to transform organizations for the betterment of their human capital. He's also a published author and regularly speaks at leading industry events. Shakun, thanks a lot for speaking at our small podcast here. Right here, it really means a lot that you're with us here today. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience as well?
No, thanks, Varun, for inviting. And in terms of my professional being, you have spoken a lot. Apart from that, I think I'm a very inquisitive learner and on a constant journey to learn. Very, very privileged to be here today.
Out of quick, just before we begin with our questions and everything, what has been your biggest takeaway from the pandemic personally, given that you're very much into consciousness and all these things?
Well, I think three things I would say. First of all, human beings are grossly irrelevant in the larger scheme of things or larger consciousness.
For sure, yeah.
We do believe that we are the masters of our own universe. And I was, Varun, peeping at your tattoo here, which says
Yeah.
Aham Brahmasmi, perhaps, right?
No. It says so. This one for the audience as well. This says Amsmi Yodha.
Asmi
So
Yotha.
this
Yeah.
was
Okay. So
my.
it's
So
a
this
different.
was yeah. So this was a revelation that I had in my 20 when I was when I turned 23 a year ago or something, right? And so this is when I got this done on my birthday itself, because I'd been through a lot of things. I'm like, look, I'm a warrior, and I need to be in the same place as
Yeah.
all of those things.
So yeah, I mean, I think first of all, we are insignificant.
Yeah.
Secondly, warrior is being a warrior is very, very critical and important. No matter what life throws at you, you gotta be resilient, you gotta be agile, and you gotta uh, you know just be there. And lastly, I think we do believe that we have plans in place. So for example, majority of the corporations had business continuity plans, risk
Right.
mitigation strategies, everything got backed out of the window, right? So my take is just be in the moment, live in today, and just go with the flow.
Got it. Got it. Nisha, you would you like to introduce the guest as well?
No,
I
I would
mean,
just like
talk
to
about.
thank Shaakun really. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Shaakun and I, we've kind of spoken in the past, and it's always really nice to see, his insights and everything from every perspective that he has to add, right? It's always very unique and I would say also, very, very well thought through. So welcome, Shaakun, and
Pleasure,
really
Nisha.
excited actually to have this discussion with you today.
Right. So, Shakun, given that we've been speaking, we spoke a bit about consciousness and all these things as well. One of the very, at the outset, right, something that I think we're all curious about, given that the second wave's happening as we speak as well, the unfortunate events that we've been sort of witnessing. And we can, I think, in a way that organizations and, be it of all sizes, be it even small teams, remote teams, everyone have started to sort of notice a small dip in employee morale and, sort of getting worried again. So, what would your recommendation be, or your insights, basically, right, on how we can essentially navigate out of this crisis that's happening again?
So I think, yeah, it is a very important question to be answered. How do we bring back the morale? Because all said and done, it's been over a year, and all the business organizations, at least, are now legitimately so worried about enhancing productivity. But before we start injecting, shots of motivation to people, I think it's important for us to understand that during the last 12 to 16 months, people have fundamentally changed. And in my humble view, there are four permanent changes that have happened to people. First of all, people have become far more aware and demanding about their rights, about their benefits, and so on and so forth, right? And it's not just in the context of the organization. They do demand accountability from their political leaders, from their religious leaders, and so on and so forth. While they have become aware and demanding, I think the sense of responsibility has further gone up. Majority of the people are now more responsible towards their work, things that they are accountable for, because they do believe that there is no space for fat or flab on the boat anymore, and everybody has to deliver in spite of that. So awareness with the demands, yet being responsible, is the first permanent change. The second thing, Varun, that has happened is that people have become far more comfortable showing their vulnerabilities, whether it is about their inability to cope up with work challenges, their issues at home. People are talking about it. Even, for example, mental health and well-being. Mental illness was seen as a taboo, but now people are openly talking about it. It's our film stars, it's our politicians, and the corporate leaders that are talking about. So I think second thing which I see as a very positive development is that people are far more comfortable talking about their vulnerability. The third important thing, which has a direct bearing on how do we keep our workforce motivated, is the fact that the fundamental definition of ambition has changed. Earlier, from a context of, say, corporate careers, the ambition was very simple. You learn a particular skill, you get a qualification, and then you build a lifetime career around that. That paradigm, and I've been talking about it over the last couple of months, is that it has changed. Earlier, the paradigm was I learn something, do it 24 by 7, slog it out, and reach the pinnacle of that career. Now, that 24 by 7 has changed into 7 by 20. Research shows that on an average, people who are starting their careers now, they would have had 7 different careers and 20 different jobs by the time they retire. Now, if you look at the gig marketplace, this 20 jobs would perhaps be 200 or 500 jobs, so that has fundamentally changed. So ambition is very short-lived. Ambition is something that people want to do here and now, achieve very quickly, and move on to the next one. And lastly, I think this is again something that our country was kind of apologetic about, but has embraced it very nicely, is the work-life balance priority. I now hear more people being very open and clear about the fact that enough is enough, because now we're working. Earlier time, we thought that anytime we were invisible, that means we were not in office space, we were construed to be not working. Now that's not the case. So people are now coming forward and saying enough is enough. I'm not working and I'm not apologetic about it. So I think these four things have fundamentally changed. So any organization or any leader that wants to up the morale of his or her people will have to consider these four factors and recalibrate it. And I think the good news is majority of the organizations are redefining their priorities around people, productivity and performance, and we are still in the early stages of this recalibration, but I think we are going there.
Very interesting. So I was actually, to sort of follow with the same thing, right? I mean, I agree that ambition is sort of, becoming a very, I mean, it's not becoming a very confined concept anymore. A lot of people perceive ambition differently, and I see that to some people that look, given that you're, the modern, employee of today, he's battling against automation, he's battling against being redundant very soon if he doesn't really pick up the necessary skill sets, and over and above that, if he's not self-motivated. I think in one of our earlier conversations as well, what we notice is that if an employee today does not bring clarity and energy to the table, right, it's very impossible for the company to really work with him, especially in a remote setting, because to some extent people, companies themselves are expecting, self-motivated people to really come on board and take complete responsibility and drive things to completion by themselves. So to, keeping all of these ideas in mind, Chakun, what do you think would be the way for companies to really start, connecting back people, process, and productivity again together, right? What would your could you give some standing examples as well around these aspects?
So I'll tell you, taking people to productivity is not an event anymore. To my mind, it's a journey. And in the journey there are parts when you get bored and you don't like it, and there are times when you are really charged up. So organizations now will have to look at how do they define journeys, and technology has a role to play, and I'll talk subsequently about it. But what happens is, why is it that people are not motivated enough? Because there is a lot of mundane activity that they need to do. So the first thing is to relook at jobs and roles of people and bring more meat to their table, and take away the flab, or I take away the mundane, boring tasks and automate it. So if you look at majority of the roles today, organizations are looking at how would you reduce the burden of that so-called boring activity that depletes the motivation of people. I'll give you an example. Within our own organization, we used to do a lot of business reviews. Precursor of a business review is to create some PowerPoint presentations. Now there are individuals who like it, but majority of the people hate that process. We took a decision that we'll not use PowerPoint presentations anymore in a meeting. What we will do is look at raw data, log into a digital tool that our company invested in, so that that whole piece of drudgery goes away, and you're there. So generally now the motivation is there because the runway to that particular meeting or that event is not full of that mundane work. So that is important. And I think secondly, enablement has a very important correlation with the overall motivation. There is a lot of research proving that when people have the right kind of tools, technologies to deliver their work, then they are far more motivated to do that. So I think needless to say, organizations will have to do that. The first part of digitization during the pandemic was organizations, in the interest of the organization, because they wanted business continuity with this distributed workforce or flexi working. Now it is changing to how do you now increase the productivity and the morale and motivation of people. Therefore, the way technology will be deployed today will play a very important role. And as I said, roles, jobs, delivery of work now is not an event anymore, but it is a journey. So how do you kind of take and handhold that employee to that journey will be important.
I totally agree. Nishan, what do you think on this though? I mean, do you think that it's really important for companies to sort of have this barbell approach towards learning and development as well? What do you think on this?
Yes, definitely. I think, so far, at least being an individual contributor always meant that you have to be one up and you have to work hard and you have to, the onus was always on the employee, right? and the organization always expected creativity from the employee, and that's how you kind of had to stand apart or whatever it was. But I slowly think that it is also the organization's, not only is it in their interest, but I also believe that it is a two-way street, right? It is important for organizations to also start thinking about this, only because a creative employee or somebody who is thinking ahead means that the organization is ahead today. It's no longer us versus the organization. It is all of us put together. The organization is also as human as we are, and I think that's what possibly will change.
I agree. Shakun, how do you think? I mean, organization like Oracle, right, which is present across the globe, has thousands of employees working, together. And, for a company of your size, how do you integrate learning and development in your own journeys, and how has it really evolved over time, right?
So I think the first important piece is not to isolate learning and development. People are learning on the go, and that's the most important piece. So how is it you can enable learning when it is required, in the quantity it is required, and most importantly, in the manner in which the employee wants to consume that? And technology is going to be the fundamental backbone of that. Gone are those days when we could take people on retreats for 3 days, or put them in rooms for 8 hours of workshop. It will never happen again now. So therefore you need to understand, how do you teach them? So one is that we have recalibrated our entire learning and development journey to suit this environment. Things that required longer hours to consume have been made into smaller capsules, could be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it is also real-time learning. An example of real-time learning could be, say, for example, you and I are scheduled to have this conversation. You've invited me for a podcast. You tell me the topic is so and so. Can the system prompt me to tell me that, Shakun, hey, while you are going for this interview, here are the 5 things that you should quickly learn, or just read through, right? So that's an important piece, which today technology is able to do that. I think the third important lever of learning and development is making connections with people. Now, there are thousands of people, for example, who have joined organizations during the pandemic. They have joined virtually, remotely. They'll never run into or bump into people who could then help them. So then it becomes again organizational responsibility to find out who are the relevant people in the large, and we are a very large organization. Majority of our roles are global roles. People work in virtual teams. So how do you bring people together? How do you connect them? So again, using advanced machine learning and AI capability, we could do that. And I think lastly, it is about empowering people to learn when they want it, and how they want it. So we've invested significantly in making sure our employees have platforms and avenues of learning, not within the organizational ecosystem, but the entire ecosystem. It could be professional bodies, it could be competitor information, it could be, large part of it is collated as a part of our learning experience for the individuals using advanced technology, and large part of it is through empowering people to sign up for things, learn on their own, and then report back. So that's how we are leading.
Sounds like a super well-oiled machine, and I think a lot of people should be taking notes around this aspect as well. Because what I feel is that, while just allocating learning budgets, or just allocating a couple of to dos in the form of course outcomes or anything, I don't think that's enough anymore, because that's a very static way to learn. And I believe that experiential learning is what, I think the right term would be to experiential learning, be it collaborative forums, or be it by really interacting with peers in the industry, or doing all those things, right? And really figuring out what the signal is in all the noise. uh, Nisha, do you have any thoughts and questions around this?
Yeah, I think Shakun, it'll be interesting to know how if we can shift the spotlight onto the CHRO a little bit, and talk about how leaders can on the one hand think about performance management, on the other productivity, as well as I think somewhere not lose sight of business growth. um, you know um, uh, moving forward, I think how has that, according to you, how has that equation changed, and what should CHROs be aware of?
So I have a personal observation which has now casted an opinion that I'm carrying and sharing with you. HR department per se traditionally used to be the most rigid of all the departments because they were the conscious keeper of the organization. They were the monitors. They were the people who were responsible for putting compliance in place. That kind of role requirement, that kind of accountability, and sometimes that kind of power created a lot of idiosyncrasies in HR professionals. And I'm sorry, I'm telling the past, so a lot of people may not be very happy listening to this, but that's what the reality is, the way I see it. There were policies in organizations that just did not make sense. Certain things which have become hygiene today were still being contested. For example, if you look at till about a couple of years ago, even a hardcore technology company like Yahoo was divided whether remote working or flexi working should be allowed or not. The world was divided about 18 months ago on this whole paradigm. But what I'm surprised is that CHROs and the HR fraternity has turned out to be the most agile and most flexible, most adapting of all the functions, across the globe. The speed at which we have let go of our nonsensical processes, the speed at which we have recalibrated our mindset in how compliances are run, most importantly, the speed at which we have seen benefits like, employee mental health and well-being, the policy around leaves and so on and so forth is amazing. It was almost overnight that every sector, every industry, every organization imbibed the global best practices that a select few used to boast about. So I think that's a very interesting thing that has happened in the HR fraternity. And the second thing I'm really impressed with is at the speed at which they have embraced technology and digital. Majority of the HR organizations in large or complex organizations are years, perhaps decades ahead in the last 12 months on their digital journey than they were, in all these years. So their ability to embrace technology and their ability to change the mindset has really impressed.
I entirely agree because when the the pandemic really started last year, when things started to become more and more ambiguous every day. Like I think my own organization, we went overnight, and a lot of other startups also really went overnight. And I'm sure this was the case across the board, right? HRs for sure, the way that they've because I think processes being everything aside, I think the very important part why HRs exists in an organization is to really ensure that there's engagement, to really ensure that people are interacting and people are able to reach out to each other, to even to the company as well, and all that orchestration is very well maintained. And which is why me and Nisha even probably started this podcast as well, because we really were impressed by I mean, this is like you said, Shakun, this is the most agile transformation, the most agile thing to have ever happened in the corporate world or in the professional world for that matter, because trust me, even products don't pivot this fast as people have. I
In
mean,
fact, Varun, I have gone ahead and said that in 2020, the world of so let me repeat that. In 2020, HR saved the world of work. In
for sure.
2021, they will redesign the world of
Yeah.
work. So that's the kind of importance and flexibility that they are bringing.
Hopefully with some assistance from the edge from me and Nisha as well to help redesign the world in terms of the playbooks and the wonderful things that are coming out as well. Shameless plug, but hey, I had to put that in. So but yeah, it's pretty interesting how all of this is really shaping up, and especially around work, because work I think is a large part of our lives, and it's very important to really have conversation like this and to really think about, hey, this is probably where things are going, but this is where ideally we should be going. This is what we should be doing, right? So around this aspect, right, what do you think should be the top? I mean, the line that you said that HRs are going to really redesign the world in 2021 and the years ahead. What do you think the top five or the top three agenda points are going to be for every HR of of different scales. Be it startup, be it of some, or a giant like Oracle, be it everybody basically.
So I'll tell you, Varun, before I tell you those top 3 points, the whole definition of work has changed. You know, again, I'm talking east versus west. For example, there was a hierarchy and shame associated with some kind of works, and there was sophistication associated with some other kind of work. Because our families, our loved ones didn't really understood what we do outside when we step outside, right? All that is gone, right? Now everybody knows, no matter what you are, who you do, largely we end up doing the same stuff, right? We are solving problems, we are working long hours, and so on and so forth. So that little aura that was around certain roles, and apology that was around certain other roles has gone away. People are far more comfortable, and I think for eastern economies, specifically countries like India, for example, that's a great blessing, because that divide versus in good work versus bad work is not existing anymore. Work is work, so that's important. Secondly, people are putting now lesser importance on work, right? Earlier the work was the center of the life. Today there are other things that have become, I mean, survival, perhaps health is the center of the life, and work is one plugin. So I think that's important piece. With that in mind, I think HR needs to do 3 things. First of all, completely relook at the way they look at work. When I say relook at work from an HR perspective, it will mean how job descriptions and roles are defined, right? Today, organizations or HR teams have to understand their business and think out how the work can be done, rather than who is the best fit for a particular role. I think that's a very big statement that I'm making. Because imagine if you tomorrow go to a CHRO and say you need to hire a strategy head for say XYZ company for an XYZ role. They have a very typecast image of what that role is, and therefore what kind of a person will fit in. But I think the CHROs or the HR professionals will now have to step back and see, okay, if this is the work that needs to be delivered, how can it be delivered? Can I really break the role into multiple parts? Can I put some of it to a machine worker, some of it to a gig worker, some of it to a part-time worker, some of it to my existing people as volunteers, and then find somebody who's perhaps much lower in cost, much lower in caliber to do some part of it. So this disintegration of job responsibilities, job roles, those kind of things will be very important. Secondly is about how they look at people. Majority of the roles will undergo change. There will be new roles that will be emerging. HR's role, in fact, Cognizant has published a report where they say there are 21 new roles that are emerging in HR, and they have very fancy roles like chief happiness officer, for example. Now, if you were to hire for a chief happiness officer, there is no precedence of that role, and therefore you will not have a particular person suited for that role. So therefore, the second message that I want to give is, stop looking at people and their skill set with a particular mindset. In fact, I would believe that in today's scheme of things, people with varied experience, people with, sorry to use the term, but screwed up CVs, because, they've been all over the place, they've done all sorts of work, are far more important, or perhaps, let me not compare or judge, but they bring a lot of unique value to the table. So a lot of people or a lot of CVs that would get rejected earlier should now be relooked at in a different. And lastly, I think digitization, leveraging technology is not a choice anymore. It's a fundamental imperative. So those are the 3 things I would recommend.
I think I took great heart from the fact that you spoke about screwed up CVs. I keep talking about the fact that I'm not a conventional CV.
I carry one of such CVs myself.
And I'm half the time my head is screwed up because of the screwed up CV. I'm like, where the hell am I headed? So
yeah, but if you look at, sorry, Nisha, but if you look at the kind of experience such people have, kind of journeys that they have navigated, kind of challenges and insights that they can bring is absolutely, priceless, I would say.
And I totally agree with this as well. In fact, since we're on the subject of CVs, right? I know we're siding for the discussion, but then since we're on the subject, right? I think what Shaakun and mentioned as well, that look, CVs and everything really need to be changed, and the roles, the entire definition is changing now. For someone like me, and a lot of my peers who sort of had similar journeys as I have had, it's very difficult to really judge a person based on the number of years experience, because right now because a lot of people are, at least the, the Gen Z and the millennial workforce, the new ones like me who've recently just started entering the workforce and are really trying to build their careers as well. They've all had a T-shaped sort of skills with them, right? Which is more broad. They're doing a lot of things on the side. They're trying to really figure out their own ways of how the world works, and how they're, and the kind of creativity from doing a lot of these things sort of brings a new vibrance into the current stream of work itself. Like, they start thinking different. They start solving problems in a very different way. And I think it makes more sense to not just look at CVs, but look at case studies instead. I mean, probably if I would be hiring, and I wrote about this, very recently in a post on LinkedIn as well, some personal maxims around what I think CVs and hiring would look like. I'd probably have case studies in place. I'd probably ask a person, hey, what are the 5 things that you did there that you're proud of, and tell me what problem you solved, what the approach you took, and what were the outcomes, and why you didn't take XYZ path. Because this would really give me proper insights into not just the person's personality, but the way that he's actually gone about executing with the resources that he had, and the kind of outcomes he was able to bring. So as a person, if I'm shelling out XYZ, capital for this person, I wouldn't mind exceeding the budget if I see the potential of him bringing more value as well. Nisha and Chakun, what do you think about this way of instead reviewing candidates as well?
I think, firstly, I really think that the CV is quite a dead document. I somewhere I even called it a graveyard or a skeleton, because it's like the past of what you've done. It's not the future of what you will do, right? And I really believe that it's important to look at the person as a whole. And we're not talking about soft skills at all in a CV. We're not talking about how a person deals with a certain situation in a CV. I wish it was more real time and you could actually talk about, how you dealt with a particular situation in your life. Uh, the other point to me is the CV. It goes back to the JD, and that's where I think things have to change a little bit, because the JD, and because of this whole keywords thing that is so popular with the JD, you will immediately, if you are not a keyword as part of that particular organization, I'm telling you, because it's my experience, you're out immediately. So, I mean, that's why I was asking Shakun, what happens to the screwed up guys? Like, where do they go? Because the JD doesn't accommodate for screwed up CVs. But yeah, that's really, I mean, we're digressing, Shakun. Sorry, we're kind of having a little
Sorry, I
fun.
took you off the track. Yeah, but I think uh, very soon we will completely have a different way of hiring people. Some of the organizations already have. Uh, I fumbled upon an article which says how to write a CV for bots to pick your keywords up, right? Which was kind of scary for me. Imagine two machines. You feed into a software. Okay, this is the JD, or this is the role that I want to apply, and it churns out a CV which will kind of machine language will match. But I think that will not sustain for long, because already technology is far more advanced, and all said and done, for significant recruitments it will be human to human connections, human to human interactions, and it will be the human judgment that always will supersede any kind of automation, or any kind of I would say idiosyncrasy that has kind of creeped in.
Got that, and fully cognizant of time as well, Shafin. Let's kind of talk about uh, given all this ambiguity, uncertainty, and challenges that we are witnessing, how is it that Oracle's HCM Cloud, equipped to kind of empower CHROs, to navigate people, performance, productivity, but also having a clear, radar of business growth. And if you can just talk a little bit to us about, Oracle's HCM Cloud, and how did you guys really think about it, and some use cases of how it is helping CHROs. I think that would really help. and
So I'll
everything.
tell you. Before the world got into this crisis situation, we always promised that when organizations invest in, say, a product like Oracle HCM Cloud, it will give them ability to be agile and resilient and respond very quickly. Now, there were no product features per se that we could say, okay, because we have this feature, you will be able to do that. It is ingrained in the ecosystem that we have built around the product, the technology, the integrations, and so on and so forth. And most importantly, the mindset that we carry. So if you look at the last 12 months, of course, our product is very old. We've been constantly innovating. Gartner for multiple years has rated us the highest in terms of being a leader, both in terms of execution capabilities, product roadmap, and innovation, and so on and so forth. But when we saw this unprecedented thing, we realized that the needs of the hour are very, very different. CHROs need different kind of handholding. So we were able to very quickly set aside the original roadmap and adapt our journey to do something different. Within the first few weeks of the pandemic, we were able to roll out a COVID specific employee health and safety module, which incidentally we offered free of cost to all our customers so that they can very quickly, without wondering what new application I need to install, how will I track this? So just to give you an example, majority of our customers had health and safety protocols, which were meant to be either managing health and safety during office or in case of a lot of professional service during commute and all. Now entirely a different set of protocols came in. So that was one example where we were able to give it very quickly. We realized that digital assistants, for example, having chatbot capability, which was a new thing coming in, has suddenly become very, very important in case of this distributed workforce and remote workforce. So we augmented the capabilities of our natural language processing, our voice command based digital assistant. And again, we've given it by default as a product, because we want to really help our customers and not bind them. As we are now seeing this return to work, I alluded to the fact now it's about journeys. So we've actually launched just 10 days ago a new feature which is called Journeys, where we tell step-by-step process for each individual at a very personal level on how he should go about doing things. Imagine you had a mentor or a buddy at work when you joined that would take you through that. That has now been digitized, and machine learning, artificial intelligence plays a role. Now, those journeys could be navigating somebody a new job because he or she is a new joiner. It could be navigating, developing a skill set. It could be even navigating your way to a position of your choice within the organization through the succession planning and career development process. And I could go on and on talking about it, but I think having a robust platform that can respond to the needs of the external market, bring in technology, product, and features, and offer them without any kind of restrictions or cost compulsions. That's what we have taken a lot of pride in doing, and that's what our customers are talking about.
It's definitely fantastic because I mean, throughout this description of Oracle's HCM Cloud, you sort of continuously emphasize how agile the platform is and how agile Oracle's own approach was. Because I think going overnight for all your customers to be in the space of ambiguity and then thinking, hey, what application do I use now? I have to again, shortlist vendors, send a purchase order, do this, do that, customize it, white label it, do a bunch of these things. And then I think it's really brilliant how you took the lead and said, hey, look, we're giving this for free because we don't want you to suffer, and let's just get ahead with it. Let's go ahead. And I think that continually reaffirms the fact that look, as an industry, I think the reason that it's evolved or it's evolving at such a fast pace, and the reason that why we're all able, I think most employees across all organizations, I think barely felt less than 1% of the pain of this, of the changing, workforce that HRs, I mean, as compared to HRs, because HRs have really, take most of the burden. And they see this thing about design, right? Good design is seldom noticeable. Like you rarely take notice of it because that's how good it is. And I feel like the way that you've designed the solution, the way that you've also gone about this approach tells the same story. That HRs inherently, at the start of our conversation as well, you mentioned maybe you were just discussing about how quickly HRs had to again adapt overnight as well, right? And if it's in their DNA, then of course they'd like to use a product that also carries the same DNA, right? It makes a lot of sense to do that. So it sounds pretty good, Shakun, that that this is the step that you've been taking to sort of develop such products for the HR industry and for all CHRs also out there. Nisha, do you have any concluding thoughts around this?
Well, I think I just enjoyed this discussion, Shakun. Thank you so much. Like I said, I always believe that you bring in some of you bring in some observations that are so obvious, but like Varun spoke about good design, right? You ignore them or you don't, think about it because they're so obvious. Uh, so I think that's what this has been about. Well, is there anything else, Shakun, that you think, especially from an employee's standpoint, I think what I am starting to think about is once I start returning and going back to work, right? What should I be prepared for, and what should I demand from my organization? If you can kind of throw some light on that, and then we can kind of conclude for today.
So Nisha, I think neither the organization nor the employee now is in a position to demand anything of each other, right? Demand is perhaps a wrong word to my mind. Talent marketplace, very interestingly, is the only marketplace in the world now where two sellers are trying to sell each other. There's no buyer, right? So if I'm an employee, then I'm trying to sell my skill sets, my capability, my promise to produce results. And if you are an employer, then you are trying to sell me that opportunity. So imagine it's not a buyer and a seller relationship in a marketplace, it's seller versus seller. And I think that has a very interesting connotation. Employees need to actually be very clear about the value that they would bring to the table. Secondly, how will they maintain relevance? Because there was a time when we used to join organization and then put the burden of developing us and keeping us relevant to that. So first, employees need to bring to the table the value that they will add here and now. How will they keep themselves valid or relevant and not become redundant? And thirdly, how will they ensure competitiveness for the organization? Once these three things are clear, I don't think that they have to demand anything. They will command the value that they deserve and that is perceived. So that's my thing. Every individual has to take care of these three things. Show the value that you can create here and now. Show them that you will never become redundant. Thirdly, make sure that you're sorry, I forgot what I said, the third point.
Essentially, what so I mean, I totally agree that the way that try to sort of bucket
What you
this.
did
Yeah,
mention, sorry, well, this one.
yeah,
I
please.
think
I'm
what you
hoping we
said, the
can
third
edit this
point
one
was,
now.
yeah, no, don't worry. But I think the third point you mentioned was the value, right? If you're able to
Right.
create that value, then
Yeah.
then you will command and not demand. So yeah, I think, but brilliantly put, Shakun. I really love that
Yeah,
part.
truly. Because I think the way that the mindset shift for even to applying to jobs as well, I feel that people should start thinking about it as a job, but rather think about it as a client. Imagine that you're actually pitching your services to a client. How would you do it? What would your 30, 60, 90-day plan be? What would the value that you would bring? Why would, if you're asking for a certain hike, which is maybe reasonable, not reasonable, whatever it is, can you say why you're charging? I mean, why you demand this apart from just your standard, hey, this is the industry standard for this role, this is this for that role. Apart from platitudes, what can you really bring to the table, right? And I think that's a brilliant maxim that I think people should really start thinking forward to as well. So Shakun, we've had a great time discussing all of these aspects with you. Nisha, it's again been pleasure co-hosting this with you with Shakun as well. So we'll be back with another episode next week. The transcripts of this episode, along with the playbooks, all of this will be shared again on the newsletter itself. Everyone, please be sure to, again, if you want to, if you like to reach out to Shakun as well, we'll leave Shakun's details as well out there. Feel free to reach out to me and Nisha for feedback, for anything that you'd like to ask as well. And be stay tuned for another episode of the Edge podcast for CHROs. Thanks a lot, guys.